Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
And welcome to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute, a podcast that celebrates the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. And today we've got one serious OSHA violation of a moment coming your way as we look at minute number 3 of Blazing Saddles. I'm your host. I'm Alan Sanders.
I am your co-host, Walt Murray.
And Walt, we've got a couple more credits to get into, but we also finally get the movie underway today.
Yes, we do, in our first real good uncomfortable moment for the hosts.
It's uncomfortable for 2 reasons. 1, because we're doing this podcast.
That's right.
And 2, because we're going to have to talk about what's in this movie.
That is correct.
We may single-handedly take the Movies by Minutes community and tear it down.
Yes, we very well might.
There will be a nationwide backlash. There will be a hashtag movement. There will be rallies in major cities, all because we chose to look at this movie 1 minute at a time.
Fortunately, we have our 0 episode, which we would encourage you to go back and listen to before you listen to this.
If you skip the 0, go back, start every watching of each minute with rewatching or re-listening to minute 0.
Yes, where we explain our feelings on some of these words that are going to be used. So, yeah. So, anyway, let's start with the couple of names of people that we can blame for this.
Yes. The major one, Mr. Mel Brooks himself.
You big jerk.
Thanks, Mel. Love ya.
Yeah, and I guess this is why he has not responded to my my recent email asking him to join us for this for the opening of this movie.
Right. He realizes, look, I could make this movie in 1974. I can't talk about it in 2019.
Can't do it now. You can barely do a podcast on it.
No, apparently we're going to find out we probably can't. Folks, this podcast actually doesn't exist. You've stumbled across something, and it's just you're having a stroke right now.
That's right. That's right. You're
listening to true crime.
Right. This is a fever dream.
You're in the Han Solo. You've been in Carbonite, and this is your fever dream. So blame it on that. In all honesty, if you hear things that are offensive to you, it's your fault.
Well, and frankly, if you hear things that offend you, we hear things that offend us. So we're in this together, folks.
I'm sitting across from my co-host, and he offends me every day.
No question.
I find him highly offensive.
I am just a walking offense.
And smells funny, too.
I do. And my sneezes will blow the windows out.
Dear Lord, last minute, I muted the mic, and there was still a funk. Like, oh, my God. Where did that come from?
It's just healthy lungs.
It's the airflow.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just full of hot air.
Well, we could spend the entire minute, which we could consist of a couple of hours of talking nothing but Mel Brooks. But what else is there to say besides, until this movie, a lot of people looked at him as a gifted comedy writer, someone who seemed to have his way around a movie set, but had yet to really find that big hit.
Yes, and he found it times 1,000 with this one, and right behind it with Young Frankenstein. So this was the year of Mel Brooks.
One of the few directors that you could say had 2 of the biggest blockbusters in a single year, and certainly, if you look at various all-time lists, Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein arguably always in the top of the best comedies of all time.
And if you look at the way that he has influenced comedy in cinema, nobody has ever influenced comedy in cinema like Mel Brooks has.
It's a household name. I don't know anybody who doesn't know the name Mel Brooks. And even younger people understand who Mel Brooks is.
Most of them
Even
do.
if they've not seen one of his movies, it's sort of like, I know that name.
I don't know how anybody has not seen a Mel Brooks movie.
They may not know they've seen it.
Probably not.
It's sort of like Steven Spielberg for us. Everyone's heard of it. I don't know how you wouldn't have seen a Steven Spielberg movie, but even if you've never seen Spielberg, that's a name you know. George Lucas, a name you just know. I mean, I don't mean to put George Lucas and Spielberg in the same camp as Mel Brooks because they've got different kinds of movies.
Right, sure.
But in terms of affecting the cultural awareness and maybe even influencing, as you said, culture and films and cinematography, Mel Brooks is easily one of the biggest names out there.
There is no way to even begin to define what kind of influence he's had, because there are so many phrases from his movies or lines from his movies that have made their way into our culture, and his work has permeated American culture.
Yeah, absolutely. He is. I mean, and he's still alive, and he's still producing. I mean, his Young Frankenstein musical has continued to tour worldwide.
He's still on Twitter.
The last interview I had or saw with him, he was still tinkering with the idea of how to convert Blazing Saddles to a Broadway musical.
I don't know how you do that.
I don't either.
I really don't. I'm trying to get my arms around this. When you told me that earlier, I've been mulling that one. I have no idea how you do that. We're having a hard time struggling through one word in this movie, and there are maybe 3 words in this movie that come up a few times that we are struggling to get through and how we talk about them. How you convert this movie to Broadway, I have no idea.
It'd be interesting to see what he can do. And apparently in that same interview, he said he's already worked out some of the songs, but one of the things he said, admittedly, I need someone with a little more energy and someone who can really help kind of fill in a lot of the gaps.
Yeah.
And that hasn't, I guess, happened just yet.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to find somebody who's willing to take that on and someone who has the talent to be able to do that.
Right as the song starts to, the Blazing Saddles theme is fading in the background, and then it kind of coincides with Mel Brooks, the director's name, fading. The camera, in the meantime, is doing something you don't see a lot of. Normally, it's thought of as a bad thing to zoom in.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, the camera pushes in, and so you would have to lay, but there's so much land between, you wouldn't be able to hide the dolly track. So they are literally zooming in to at least let us know that we're moving now into that line of people, and it looks like it's kind of focused on a man on a horseback. And as we get kind of closer to the horse, we immediately shift to a POV shot of what looks like somebody going down a set of railroad tracks.
Yeah, and you've got guys working along the tracks. You've got apparently that horse that we were seeing from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
And guys swinging pickaxes and other assorted railroad tools.
Yeah, it looks like you've got some it's like long, almost, I don't want to call them like post hole diggers because it's only one post, but almost like what you would use to sort of try to maybe shove rocks or dirt underneath the cross ties for the rails to stay even. You've got a bunch of people, though, using what looks initially like pickaxes, but you pointed this out. I mean, those are really the nail drivers to nail those rails into place.
Well, and the reason I thought originally they were pickaxes is because they're hitting the dirt, but those are, several of them are the nail drivers. But I was thinking about it, you couldn't, as many takes as they probably were anticipating doing, you couldn't drive nails and hit anything solid with those things without just wearing yourself out doing multiple takes.
Well, plus the noise. Can you imagine trying to bang metal on metal?
Yeah.
So a lot of these shots, you're seeing it, and you don't pay attention until you do this 1 minute at a time.
Right.
But they're using the narrow-ended hammers, these drivers, these nail drivers. They're hitting the dirt in between the railroad ties.
That's right. And you would normally use those to drive the nails because it focuses all the energy right on the point on the head of the nail.
Mm-hmm.
So
obviously, in that combination of production noise, keep that down. You don't need to hear metal clanking on metal the whole time you're trying to capture dialogue and other things. But it is funny, if you watch a couple of these takes, you'll see people with shovels moving like a little small scoop of dirt from one side of a railroad tie to the other side of a railroad tie. And they're just like, it's nonsense, but it's repetitive sort of laborious action. So we're seeing this sense that they're working hard on the rail line, but they're not really doing
And there is no way they anticipated that 2 idiots would sit down and go through this movie 1 minute at a time and notice things like that.
Nope.
In fact, when they did this movie, they didn't even have like home video or anything like that. It was one shot of seeing it in the theater, and that was it.
Exactly. And if you wanted to see, if you missed something, you'd have to go back or somehow hope it was still playing somewhere, because once it was done its run, unless they let it come out at the theater again, you had to wait for it to come out on TV.
That's right.
And that's when you'd hope to catch it again.
Yeah, and the video just sat in the basement of Warner Brothers and hoped that it didn't mold.
Now, here's something cool. It's a little bit of a backward action to me, because we see the point of view going down the railroad tracks, and you can see you getting camera shake, so it's obviously mounted on something going down the railroad tracks. If you watch this next shot right at about 19 seconds, you see 4 guys on a hand car, and the camera now is on the other side of the track. So this is sort of, for his experience as the cinematographer, this is kind of an error, because what happens is as they start to go from left to right across the screen, you'll see they pass the same rider on horseback with his shotgun that had been sitting to the right of the tracks so the camera should have stayed on the other side of the tracks. Doesn't matter. But now the point of view was of this hand car coming into the camp.
Right. And you see there are actually 5 guys on it. You've got 4 guys pumping the action on there, and then one guy standing on there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a hand car. It's the old fashioned, if you're going to be working up and down the railroad line, you can pump it to move up and down the railroad tracks. So yeah, 4 guys, 2 guys on each side, pumping seesaw fashion to get the momentum heading. And it looks like, which we're going to be introduced to the first bits of dialogue, and we get a character, Lyle, played by Burton Gilliam,
who is one of our favorite characters for a number of reasons. He is, I guess we'll learn later, he's not the foreman, but he's one of the supervisors here.
He's sort of the right-hand man. He's I don't want to call it the muscle necessarily, because I think anybody here is considered muscle.
Yeah.
But he's probably the second in command.
Yeah, right. He's probably
right now it seems like he's the first. We'll find out he's not, but he certainly is calling the shots right now.
That's right. And he's wearing, and I'm going to point this out for a specific reason, he's wearing his very distinctive black vest, red shirt, and khaki-colored pants, and his black hat, which for the actor becomes a very important thing for him, because in my research, I found out that he is he still plays the exact same character today on Ford commercials in Texas, wearing the exact same costume. And I was told that when Burton was cast for this part, that he came out, started doing the acting, and he was told by Mel Brooks that you will want to save this costume because you will be able to make a lot of money on it throughout the rest of your career. And sure enough, he has, because he's played this part over and over and over again in different places.
Now, I did hear that from some of the documentaries that are out there and some of the conversations he's had captured in other interviews, that he still is working to this day. He's 80 years old.
Yep.
And tries to do, he limits how much, but he does a lot of golf tournaments and golf charities. He's an avid golfer. But yeah, that he does a lot of commercials. And tries to keep his time split between Texas and California.
Yeah, and he spends most of his time in Texas now. And he has a very distinctive voice. You will recognize it immediately when you hear it, if you hear it in some other place. He is a very talkative guy. He is a very interesting guy. And I love his character here. There are things about his character that I want to punch him in the face, but I love his character.
Well, I think one of the first stories we can tell is he was very uncomfortable with this day of shooting.
Yeah, my understanding is that he was not comfortable with some of the racial epithets that he had to throw around. And one of the actors said, "Hey, look, the one of the goals of this movie is that you're a bad guy, and we're trying to expose how bad racism is."
Right. Cleavon Little actually had a very pointed conversation saying, "Look, you need to sell it. Your job. You're the actor. These are your lines." He said, "Now, if I thought this is what you really thought, if I thought that you were going to be saying this to me when the cameras aren't rolling, we're going to have a different conversation."
Absolutely.
But he said, "No, you're not going to upset me at all." But he was really worried about upsetting people on the set.
We interrupt this episode to bring you a comment from actor Burton Gilliam.
There is a little story that, when we were doing that scene, which was probably in about the second week of working, where we went out on the desert, did the first scene where I'm saying all those things to Cleavon Little, and that was a little bit a little different for me. Here I am from Dallas, Texas, and I have everything that I said in the picture I had said before, not in a bad way, but just that was the normal talk back then. But still, I was having a little trouble saying those words to Cleavon in that very first scene. and they were doing a different camera setup, and he said, "Hey, come on, let's go out on the desert here." So I said, "Okay." So we got a Coca-Cola or something. We walked out over there. He said, "Listen, I know you're having a little bit of a tough time here with all this stuff, all the things you're saying to me, but listen, we're doing a movie. This has nothing to do with real life. I'm not asking you how you really feel about me. These are lines that Mel and all the other people have written. Don't worry about it." And I said, "Oh, golly, thank you very much. That makes me feel much better." And then he said, "Come on, let's go back." So we started back. He said, "Oh, but listen, after they say cut, don't you dare say those words to me." He said, "We will go to Fifth City."
We'll go to Fist City.
That's great.
Fifth City. That's exactly what he said. I'd never heard of Fifth City before. He said, "We'll go to Fifth City."
We now return you to where we left off.
Well, and he's an interesting guy because he's from Texas. He was a firefighter, and he got cast in a movie and as kind of an extra in Texas. And I can't remember what movie it was that was shooting there. And he was so good that they started giving him lines. And then this came up, and Mel said, "That's the guy I want for Blazing Saddles." And so he came out and did this. So this was all new to him. Right. So he was very, very uncomfortable offending people and whatever. And they said, "No, you gotta do it."
Yeah, I think one of the things he said in an interview, one of the behind the scenes, he had a pretty solid career. Everybody was like, "You're going to quit for this?" And then he said, "Yeah, so I'm going to be in a movie." And then he said, "I started looking through the lines and started going, I may never work again."
Yeah, you may not.
He actually, I think at one point was concerned that he made the wrong decision.
Yeah, this had to be, even in I think they shot in 1973. Even then, you had to sort of feel like, I may be the biggest enemy in all of American culture after this one.
Yeah. There had to be a lot going through your head because, I mean, the whole notion that, I mean, we had gone past the civil rights movement. We were heading in the right direction in the country. There were still areas of the country that were adamantly opposed, and yet there were some areas of the country that were 100% saying it's high time that we stop this divisiveness. And he was of the mindset that said, we're trying to go in the right direction, and I'm playing the character that's polar opposite of where we're headed.
Yeah, and this is even like today, when you hear somebody make some racial comment, it just feels so out of place. And it feels really, you just kind of look at that person like, what kind of ignorant idiot is this? And so he, here you go. Here are your lines. Yeah. You're the ignorant idiot.
Right.
So that's tough.
Well, the very first thing is it's obviously hot and warm. We get the sense that the dirt is like when they pile the dirt from one place to another, there's a little bit of dust that flies in the air.
Flying.
It's gritty, and you can tell these guys are not working with their full strength either. I mean, they look tired. I mean, they're swinging their hammers and their pickaxes and their shovels, but I mean, they're not doing it very quickly.
Have you ever done work like this, like splitting firewood or anything?
I have done a lot of this kind of manual labor on projects in my backyard. My dad, actually, we did a big project putting railroad ties in to help build up the backyard for sort of landscaping. Some of the hardest work we ever did, because not only are those railroad ties heavy, but to try to pound a nail through it far enough to go all the way through it into the next railroad tie so it'll keep it from moving, it was just... I don't want to call it backbreaking because that seems cliche, but it was like backbreaking.
It is. It wears you out fast.
Yeah.
And particularly if it's not something you do regularly, it will flat take it out of you. And watching these guys, I can relate to how they're feeling. I mean, and then out in that hot sun, and, Burton Gilliam, Lyle's line here is, come on, boys, the
way you're lollygagging around here with them shovels, you'd think it was 120 degrees. This is the greatest follow-up. Can't be more than 114. And you can see he thinks it's funny.
Oh, he thinks it's hilarious.
That's he's cracked himself up.
Yeah, and I'm with him. I think that's funny.
It is. Well, it is funny. It's terrible, but like, is that how you motivate people to work harder?
Yeah, right. Make fun of them. Well, and the guy who's right behind him is laughing and nodding, and oh yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, they of course the obligatory yes men surrounding the guy here.
Yep,
he just told a funny. Let's all laugh and make everybody feel bad.
All the guys who aren't swinging the axes and swinging the tools are the ones who are laughing.
The ones not doing the actual labor.
Right.
Did you ever? All right. Quick side note: did you ever have a job like that where people that weren't doing any physical labor were trying to tell you how to do it better?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Yes. Every physical job I've ever had, that always happened.
It drove me nuts when you'd have somebody like, if you did it this way, I'm like, you want to come do it?
Right.
You want to walk? I'll be more. Here you go. Here's a shovel. Oh, no. I got things I got to do. Well, then you can move along.
Well, one of the weirdest jobs I had was kind of fun. It was when I was in college. And I actually just had lunch this week with a friend of mine who is the Chief Justice of the Georgia Supreme Court. And we were talking about jobs that we had in college. And we both had this job, glazing hams at Thanksgiving and Christmas time when we come home from college. So you take this giant ham, you cut it in half, and then you put it on this iron ring to hold it in place. And then you just take a blowtorch with sugar and this concoction of spices, and you just torch it and glaze the ham. And we would do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them the week of Thanksgiving and the week of Christmas. And we were just talking about how you get done, you were just covered in this gritty mess and smelled like a ham for a week, and you were ready to become a vegan after that because of but it was hot and it was tiring and it was nasty. And so, but we always had other people who were like, well, why don't you just do it this way? Why don't you just do it that way? And it's just like, well, there's one way to glaze a ham. There isn't really a better way to do it. It's just torches and hard work.
The closest I've come to any kind of jobs, I don't even want to call it similar to this. I did landscaping for a subdivision developer for one summer. And I say one summer, I think the job was a 30-day stint. Needed somebody to go around and put pine straw out, rake, lay sod, just basically the last little bits of menial labor on a planned subdivision. So the developer hired a bunch of kids, all of us 15, 16 years old, to do this stuff. And day one, I get out there and I'm thinking, God, it's hot. We're in Georgia. It's just... So I make the mistake of taking the shirt off to do all the work. Got so sunburned day one, still had to show up for day two. So I had to put on long sleeve shirt. I was miserable. The shirt was chafing against my burned shoulders and arms. I never felt that tired until I was in the Navy. Like, I didn't know what physical exhaustion really was like until I was in boot camp in the Navy.
Brutal.
And I went to boot camp in the Navy in July in Orlando. I was the smart one. I went to Orlando, July and August. Like, we got there late June, but it was really all throughout July, all August, and I graduated in early September before going to my A school. We would actually literally have Black Flag days where it was so hot and humid that the federal government said, I don't care, you can't have people working out outside.
Oh, wow.
They were called Black Flag days. And our instructors hated it because they wanted to take us out there all the more.
Sure.
In fact,
yeah, those are great days to be out there.
One day, here we are. This is a Navy story. One day, they got, I don't know who ticked who off, but one of our, we had two squad leaders. We had a black petty officer and a woman who had just been dumped by her boyfriend after knocking her up and leaving her as a single mom.
Oy.
So we had a mixed group. So it was, we were all males. It was a male, all 80 of us in boot camp. But the Navy was embracing the idea that you can be working for both men and women. So we had two CCs drill instructors. Our company commanders was a male and a female. She was on a I hate men kick. I don't know who said what to whom.
I can't really blame her with what she just
Well, yeah, I mean, we find that out later in boot camp, but all I know is, so here we are in Orlando, and they've got unused barracks right now. There's not a group in there, so they don't bother putting AC on in there. So imagine how hot your house would get with the AC off in the summer. Now imagine a room with nothing but just thin walls of tin metal, windows, and, tile floor with bunks. They brought us in there to cycle us, which is a fun way of saying work them out until they die.
Right.
Doing bodybuilders and push-ups and sit-ups and everything. I have never seen this phenomenon. Between all of our aspiration, all the air we were exhaling, the heat, there was water forming inside the windows.
Yeah.
The ground started to become just sopping wet with our sweat. We looked like we had all jumped in the pool. We were soaking wet.
It was probably worse inside
This
than
was
outside.
40 minutes we're being baked and doing all these exercises. And while we were in there, unbeknownst to us, the class we would go to next, they dropped the AC down to 60 degrees. So we go and we are soaked to the core. I mean, wore out. I mean, when they say like that Southern expression, I'm going to wear you out, we were wore out. And we still had half the day to go. And so I don't know who said what to whom, who ticked who off. We're exhausted. We're dripping. We're flushed. We are dying. And we walk into a classroom that's 60 degrees, and suddenly everyone's shaking their clothes because you're wet. So many people got sick. Everybody just started coming down with stuff. I mean, I didn't. I just thought it was kind of funny. But I will tell you, that's the closest to miserable I was when I've been worked out between the job, working outside, doing landscaping for a month, and then in boot camp during the summer months of Orlando.
Oh,
that was tough.
That is tough.
Just being out in the hot sun can wear you out. Doing nothing.
Well, my grandparents lived in South Georgia, and we used to go down there in the summers, and we'd work in their garden all day. And it, just that beating sunshine and the heat, the humidity of living in a swamp. That's brutal.
And the humidity actually is worse.
It's
it just sucks. It zaps the strength right out of you.
It does. It's just like wearing a wet blanket all day.
So I guess that's the one thing about being where they are. It's a little more arid. It's really hot.
Yeah,
but
it's a dry heat.
It's a dry heat.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I was in San Bernardino in 92 when it was 100. I think it was 107 degrees. And it doesn't matter. A dry heat or not, it's brutal.
That's brutal. Well, I will tell you, I've been to Vegas a couple of times. You don't realize how dry that climate is until, well, for me, I got some of the worst chapped lips of my life because I didn't know what was going on until it was already too late. Yeah. It wasn't even sunburn. It was so dry that my lips began to crack. And I had to go get this medicated stuff to put on them, and it took like 3 or 4 days to heal. Because I didn't know. Now, and then, of course, then you run into the person who goes, well, of course, if you're not from around here, you're going to need lip balm.
Right.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Einstein. Appreciate that now that I look like a freaking clown.
Right.
I look like Angelina Jolie with like her fresh Botox injection or whatever, what did they use? A collagen injection.
Oh, collagen. Oh, yeah.
I was duck lips before duck lips were cool.
I don't know if they're ever really cool.
I look like Mick Jagger walking around the... Hey,
it's a good look for you.
I'm at the CES Consumer Electronics Show. Come on by our booth.
That's a great look.
Yeah. It was terrible. It was so painful. I mean, I've had dry lips. I've never had them where they were cracking and bleeding.
So did you have somebody come up and say, "Hey, you're acting like it's 120 degrees. It couldn't be any more than 114."
No, but chances are I would have punched him.
Yeah. I know that's kind of what you expect here is you want somebody to hit him in the face.
Well, getting back here, ironically, you mentioned that just as he says this, and this can happen with dehydration. You're cramping up, you're hurting, and one of the Chinese members of the work crew seizes up, grabs his stomach, and falls. And I love the sound effect. I mean, it's almost like a cartoon fall.
It sounds like a sack of oatmeal hitting the ground or something.
It's so over the top cartoon fall. But he hits the ground, and Lyle looks ticked off all of a sudden at it.
Yeah.
Dock that chick a day's pay for napping on the job.
Yes, sir.
I mean, he is upset. In fact, he wants to dock that individual's pay.
Dock him a day's pay.
For napping on the job.
Which is so awesome. I mean, the guy obviously falls out, but he's napping on the job.
Yeah, right. Like, you know what? This is
lazy.
This almost reminds me of sort of that tongue-in-cheek, the southern, that type of backwoods southern sheriff doesn't like the long-haired hippie driving through town, stops him for no reason, then goes and busts the taillight and says, well, you got a busted taillight. So it's obvious this guy's dehydrated and passed out, but well, I'm just going to say, no, he was napping on the job, so I don't have to pay him.
Yeah. Well, and I love that it's not just, hey, this guy, dock him a day's pay, but he makes a show of it. Mm-hmm. Dock him a day's pay for napping on the job.
Yeah, well, we're avoiding the epithet here, but there is
I'm definitely going to avoid it.
there is a Chinese slur here he uses for the person to describe him. And the dude collapses along the railroad ties. I mean, it looks like he banged his head.
Well, I think this is I know it does. It looks like he hits the end of that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things I really do like about this is you see the kind of cold-hearted disregard for other people from the first guy who throws one of these epitaphs out there.
Right.
So it definitely does paint him as kind of being a jerk and being cold-hearted.
Now, you know something interesting, and I don't know if anyone's ever really paid a lot of attention. One of the first guys that they pan across is a white dude.
Yeah.
There's Chinese guys, there's black guys, but there's a white dude
probably Irish.
Probably an Irishman.
Yep, probably an Irishman. One of my your
ancestors working on the railroad.
Yep, and well, there are a couple of great books out there that dispel some of the myths of the Wild West. But one of the things that they talk about is that the people who built the railroad are the Chinese, the Irish, and a couple of other racial groups like that were basically poor, and a lot of the African American freed slaves were out there working. And
a lot of the freed slaves went to go work for the railroad.
Yeah, so it was an easy way for them to make money kind of fast, and they were paying decently well, but man, the work was tough.
It was very hard. I mean, there's the folklore, John Henry, the Ballad of John Henry, the guy who was told that a steam drill would be able to go through rock faster than a man, and he didn't like the idea that a machine could do a work better than a man, and apparently challenged it to see who could dig a 10-foot hole faster or through rock faster, and he won, but ended up having a heart attack later and dying. There's a tall tale. Well, I guess it's not really a tall tale because he was a real person, but John Henry, he actually we do a show. We do a show at the Grand Theater where it's called Tall Tales and Legends. And I'll reenact that story. I'll tell the story of John Henry and about how strong he was and how powerful, but what a big heart he had.
Huh.
But that one of the things that in the narration of the story is when he would look back along the rail line and realize how many people died and were buried along those very railroad tracks that were initially being forged in America, that he said even though he was freed, it didn't seem a whole lot different than when he was on the plantation.
Wow.
People were just buried right where they worked.
And unmarked normally, and if they were marked, the marker didn't stay for long.
But the nice thing about John Henry, and what I love about telling that story, is it's such an inspirational story as well about hard work and effort, and that that he wasn't too proud to do a hard day's work, and that he wasn't going to let a machine do the job that a man should do.
Right.
And it's a great lesson for not just black youth, everyone.
Yeah. Well, and I remember seeing the John Henry story when I was a kid, and one of the other students pointed out that John Henry was black, but the guy on the film strip, he was portrayed as white. And one of the other kids in the class said, "I thought John Henry was black." And the teacher did explain that, yes, he was.
That's weird that they would produce a film strip with him the wrong color or not shaded enough.
I think we're talking about this very problem with this movie, that in order to make it palatable for people, they made him white. And dude, race issues are so messed up in this country historically. I mean, it's just crazy. It's so irrational.
It is. It is totally irrational. And something that you and I can't even really wrap our minds around.
No.
I get the humor of this movie so much because I can laugh at the stupidity of the people that are perpetrating this.
Exactly. That's exactly. And it is. It's just stupidity. It's just utter stupidity.
All right. So let's get back, because I think we're at the end of the minute here, because basically
we are. We're at the end of the minute.
He ends right with that line about docking him a day's pay for napping on the job, and that's exactly where it stops. So we have no idea what else is going on here. Obviously, they're working on the railroad. That's important. That must be important. It's the first thing we're being introduced to.
That's right.
And Lyle is certainly an important character. We're being introduced to him right away, and we get there's no doubt what kind of a person he is in terms of his judgment of others based on their ethnicity.
Yes, absolutely. And it's easy to hate him right off the bat.
Yeah, so certainly a strong disregard for him.
Yes.
Strong dislike. Actually, that's the hard thing. These guys are likable, even though they're flawed.
Right.
I mean, You do hate the kind of character they are. But Slim Pickens is funny as Taggart.
Oh, yeah.
Harvey
they're
Korman
hilarious.
is hysterical as the money grubbing, I'm going to do what I have to steal the land to buy it cheap and make the money.
Right. And the governor is a great, just dumb character. You know?
So I think we got to be careful calling him too hateful, because we're not doing the movie Mississippi Burning.
Right.
You know, we're doing the movie Blazing Saddles. And you've got to have some likability as well with even the bad guys, so that way the story, the satire comes through.
Yeah. Well, and they're kind of the love to hate.
Yeah.
You kind of love to hate them.
Right. Like, it's almost like you almost go, oh, bless your heart. You just don't know any better.
Well, and you don't just feel that way about him because of what he said, but it's also kind of that jerk of a boss that we've all had, you know, the person who goes through life and has no concern for other people around them. You know, that's an easy guy to hate.
It is. And, you know, again, we hate the character, but we have somehow also find it kind of almost funny that he's saying things that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe he just said that.
That's right. And you kind of, right off the bat, you're like, I can't wait to see it. Just get this guy, get it stuck to him. You know, you're ready to stick it to him right now.
So that's where we're going to end, about the introduction of Lyle, the introduction of the Railroad Gang, some folks out there working very, very hard, but being made fun of by the crew. And I wonder where that's going to lead us. I know we've got some help coming for the next couple of days. Jim O'Kane will be our guest tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing from Jim and get his perspective.
Should be a lot of fun to get his perspective, not just this movie, but about the railroad. I'm sure, I bet he knows more about the railroad and all of this kind of industry than you have and I have combined.
I was going to say, and the railroad, again, if you are not familiar with, you know, the West and how the United States grew, the railroad was an integral part of America becoming what it was.
Oh, it was a game changer.
It was.
It changed everything from the cattle industry to travel to exploration and commerce.
Yeah.
I mean,
and if
huge.
you think about it, before the railroad was built, the only way to travel across the United States, there was no waterway. You got in a wagon or on a horse and you traveled across the country.
Mm-hmm.
That was it.
Yep.
So the railroad was a huge game changer for the country.
Certainly was. For all of its flaws about maybe the labor used behind it, like I made the joke about saying that this is one OSHA violation minute after, you know, to begin. But there was no OSHA. There was no government, you know, oversight. No. That's just how it was.
That was it.
You hired strong backs and paid them pennies, much like the pharaohs.
Yeah, you had, I mean, there was no oversight. I mean, there weren't even telegraphs. And you talked about...
I think at this time...
not running coast to coast, I don't think.
Nah, maybe not coast to coast yet. I think because they would build them along the rail lines.
Right. And so it was some guy with a horse running your mail back and forth.
That's right. The Pony Express didn't last very long until the telegraph took over, but that was your FedEx, and it would take 30 days to get from one side of the country to the other. And that was considered fast.
Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty amazing to think about.
Amazing stuff. Well, we'll have Jim O'Kane joining us tomorrow and Friday. And I think we actually get him a bonus day going into the following week. So we'll have a guest joining us, and that will start our long line of guests that'll take us all the way through to the end of the movie. But Walt, we are here at the end of minute number 3. Where do people find more about us?
Well, I would encourage you to, again, go to Facebook, facebook.com/The Wilder Ride, and join our listeners group, because in the listeners group, we have all kinds of discussions going on, talking about the actors and actresses from the movies, the writers and producers, the music. There's all kinds of fun stuff to find there. And then again, go to patreon.com. And we have some expenses that go along with this show. And if you have an interest in helping us out a little bit, you can do anything from $1 a month to $20 a month, I believe is our top end. And help us out a little bit there.
It goes higher than that. We'll take any amount.
We'll take any amount. And that'll also give you access at the $10 a month or more amount to some of our bonus episodes dealing with Poltergeist and Christmas Vacation.
Yeah, that's how you get the bonus. But even just the $1 a month, if you want to do that, we would appreciate it.
Be a huge help to us.
All right, and with that said, tomorrow, come on back, minute number 4. We'll get the Chinese laborer being carried off for his nap, apparently, and come back with a real song. So I guess we're getting requests now.
Yes, we are.
We'll have to see what that's all about. But for that, you're going to have to come back tomorrow, same time, on this, The Wilder Ride.
Where you will be docked a day's pay.
How do I dock you a day's pay for napping on this job?
Let's just sing a song.
Where's Walt? He's napping on the job.
Napping on the job.
I wish I could get paid to nap on the job.
I've had a few jobs I felt like I was getting paid for.
I know some
that.
people who get paid to nap on the job. Well, they get paid. They don't realize they're napping.
Yeah, I've got a few friends who, or a few people I know who nap on the job.
Yeah, I got people who phone it in. Is that
Yeah.
the same thing?
Government workers.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Wilder Ride, Getting Wilder by the Minute, a podcast that celebrates the films of Gene Riley.
Who?
Three frickin' episodes. Not even. I mean, we did have a 0 episode. That was okay. I could only maintain for 3 frickin' episodes.
Nice work.
90 more to go. I'm sorry, listeners.
The rail
I'm so
car's off
sorry.
the track.